All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Monty and Murdy College Football Show. Thank y'all for tuning in with us. We appreciate it. We appreciate having you in, and we got an exciting episode for y'all. But first off, Monty, what's up, dude?
Not much, man. Yeah, exciting. The regular season's officially over. I'll say it every week because I'm more and more heartbroken as it's going on. But we're transitioning to probably, arguably, the most exciting part of the season here. So it's exciting stuff. We got the official playoff bracket, official playoff seeding, and we'll talk about that today. But yeah, everything's going not too bad. Ready to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, so on today's episode, we tried to kind of decided normally we do the preview and the recap episodes, but today we're going to break it down as we're really going to touch on the college football playoff teams. We're going to go kind of in order for each of those teams, how we feel about them. And then also, we'll touch upon the conference championship games that a lot of these teams played in, and hit on the major ones that they were a part of. And then we'll close it out with a game preview, Army Navy week. We told y'all, it deserves its own time. So we're going to give it its own time here on the pod. So we'll preview Army Navy right after we finish up with the college football playoff teams. And Monty, I think without further ado, man, there's a new number one team in the country here.
There is a new number one team in the country, and holy crap. This team, obviously, so everyone knows, or who doesn't know, number one Indiana, right? So they get the number one overall seed in the official college football playoff. They will be the number one seed. This was a team that I think people started to buy into, after the Oregon win. It was always, because of last year, right? They were good, but it was the question mark was the schedule. And then when they went up against Ohio State at the end of the season, they kind of got mollywopped in that one. And then they got mollywopped against Notre Dame in the playoff. And so the question mark this year was, will they be able to take that next step with Cignetti in year two, which is incredible to say even after, 1 year. And so you see them go to Eugene, Oregon this year, and they beat Oregon pretty convincingly. And that's kind of when people started to buy into them. But there was always that one game, especially as the year went on, that one game that was looming at the end, which was that Big 12, the Big 10 championship against Ohio State. And based on how Ohio State's season was going this year, after winning the national championship last year, it seemed like they only got better from last year. And so there was that Big Ten championship that was looming towards the end. It was like, okay, if Indiana gets this one, we'll know for sure that they're legit. And they did, and they're Big Ten champions in Sig's second year as the head coach in Indiana. They're the number one overall seed in the college football playoff. They got potentially the Heisman winner at quarterback, incredibly stout defense, arguably the best or one of the best in college football. They've shown with that Ohio State game and even the Iowa game, I would say, they've shown that they can rely on the defense just in case they play a defense like Ohio State again, or they play a defense like Texas Tech. Those kind of games, right? They've shown that they can rely on the defense. It'll be interesting to see how much, I don't know if, for those who didn't hear, one of their star defensive ends, Stephen Daly, he went down after the Big Ten championship game, celebrating. They were saying it looked like it was likely a patella tendon tear, I believe.
Did you watch it happen? Did you watch the video?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a little freak incident, man. He's not even really jumping that high. It just kind of
it was a freak, and it's too bad. So, yeah. But he's very, very likely out for the remainder of the college football playoff, which is horrible for him. But we'll see how their defense fares without him. But yeah, I mean, excited to see Indiana's the number one team. But yeah, that is the number one overall college football playoff team this year.
Yeah, and Indiana, as they went through the year, right, they've looked like a very complete football team. As they've, everybody they played, I know there's a couple of games that they've played really tight, which honestly, sometimes when you play play tight games, like you want to see that in a team. Like if they get pushed late into a fourth quarter game, how are they able to respond? And they've shown you they can win that way. They went in and were pretty dominant against a really good Oregon team that we're going to touch on here a little bit later. And they've won gritty with defense in both games against, like you mentioned, Iowa, and Ohio State, where they're just were able to lie on the defense. Iowa, they pulled out a 20-15 win.
Yep.
And then 13-10 over Ohio State. Just what they were able to do to Ohio State's what has been all season a very explosive offense for Ohio State.
Yeah, and that
is what's impressive, right?
Yeah, that Big Ten championship, like you said, 13-10, Indiana won that game. I had already mentioned that people had bought in after the Oregon game. I think this one, seeing that your offense doesn't score, they beat Ohio State scoring 13 points, right? And people can say about Ohio State missed that field goal at the end. Okay.
Yeah.
But it still would have been a low scoring game no matter which way it went, right? And that's why you play the game. They ended up missing the field goal. Indiana ends up winning. They were able to hold Ohio State through 4 quarters, 10 points. That's still incredible, even if they were to score that 3 points. But the reason
shank.
Oh yeah. I believe, what was it, 27-yard field goal?
27-yard field goal. Yeah, wide left.
But no, I mean, the moral of the story of that game was Indiana held Ohio State to 58 yards on the ground after Ohio State dominated the run game all season. And that was the difference. And that's when myself and probably 95%, 99% of America were like, okay, yeah, Indiana is the real deal this year and probably for a very long time.
And just how they were able to hold up on the line was the most impressive part to me. Ohio State, they've been able to run the ball just about on anybody they wanted to this year, and limited them to 2.2 yards per rush. Right? Just how that was kind of the question mark with that you talk about an Indiana team. It's like, okay, has Kurt Cignetti had enough time to recruit on the offensive defensive lines to be able to hold up against these elite opponents? And clearly, Indiana has stood the test in both of their biggest matchups so far this year against Ohio State and against Oregon. So, yeah, deservingly so. Indiana, number 1 team in the country. Do we talk about Ohio State now? Number 2. I think it was kind of unique in the committee. I think they did kind of make a point that they weren't going to drop teams too much based on these conference championship games. They'd had Ohio State number 1 through all of their rankings, and then that now I do think there is some question marks if you do start to compare Ohio State's resume to Georgia's resume. I think Georgia might have some better wins along their schedule. Ultimately, not too big of a deal. They probably didn't split too many hairs. They just said, hey, we're not going to punish Ohio State for playing in the game. They lost to Indiana, real close game. They're the number 2 team in the country. And everything you want is still in front of you if you're Ohio State, right? They won the national championship last year, and the last time we saw them before they entered the playoff was they lost to Michigan in kind of a similar fashion, a kind of grimy, beat down, slugfest of a game. And Ohio State was able to rally back, catch fire in the playoffs, and win the national championship. Now, whether that's more important or not, that's up for Ohio State fans to determine. But they won the game this year, and they got the opportunity to still win the national championship. So everything's still in front of the Buckeyes there.
Yeah. This one, I mean, I did really think that the committee, based on how the seeding works, all 4 teams get the first 4 teams get the bye, right? I think other than how the seeding works with who you play and whatnot, I thought maybe to the committee that wouldn't have mattered as much with the rankings in the top 4. So I did think that Georgia was going to flip, just because Georgia beat Alabama in a very, very convincing fashion, which we'll talk about that game, I believe, later. But I was going to say, Ohio State being number 2 or Georgia being number 2, I think either one's the right decision. So I'm not mad at them keeping Ohio State. I did think that Georgia was going to jump them just because of how the conference championship weekend went, but I agree with Ohio State staying at number 2. With that being said, I made a note. They're kind of like the 1A team, right? There's number 1 Indiana, and then there's number 1A Ohio State, I feel like, right? So either one of them could have been number 1, but the head-to-head So the only team in Ohio State's path at this point with the number 2 seed that I'm mainly concerned about is that Georgia team, which we'll talk about here in a second. But I mean, this is probably a very popular opinion, but I still feel like they're going to make a deep run. That's probably inevitable in the playoffs, especially post-loss, knowing Ryan Day and his coaching staff. So, yeah. Number 2, Ohio State is what it is. Like I said, I believe they're 1A, but I also think Georgia could be the number 2 spot. But I think they got it right. So
I think if you're any of the other playoff teams, you probably don't want to see Ohio State or Georgia in your matchup. But
yeah, Ohio State coming off a loss would not be fun to see, and Georgia, with how they're peaking right now, would not be fun to see either.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of number 3 Georgia, they got a win 28-7 over Alabama to redeem their one loss of the season, where Alabama came in and beat Georgia in Athens, and they were able to redeem themselves, get a very convincing win. I know Kalen DeBoer made a point about where it's like, oh, it was within a 14-point game in the fourth quarter. I get all that, but I mean, Georgia was in control for the majority of this game, and it was a dominant performance. So I don't want that to, I don't want to just go without talking about that. I think Gunnar Stockton, he wasn't. I mean, his stat line's not going to blow you away, right? He just took what Alabama. It was
an
efficient
efficient
day, right?
game. 20-26, 156, but he tossed for 3 touchdowns. So
yeah. Some of what we said going into it is like, I think I'd even made a point on the preview podcast for the conference championships is, it's like, if Georgia's able to run the ball, like they were, they ran for 141 yards. I was like, you don't need a lights out day from Gunnar Stockton, right? You need him to be efficient, 200 something yards. He was 156. But, I mean, the great completion percentage and was just very efficient, just taking what the Alabama defense gave him and just slowly working their way down the field and relying on a Georgia defense that, admittedly, even I questioned early on in the season as far as like how they were playing and if it was up to standards.
They had those question marks earlier in the season.
And they have rounded into form to look like a dominant Georgia unit that we are used to expecting. They are.
Yeah, and that game, it was the moral of that game was it was more about Georgia's run defense and Bama's non-existent run game than anything else. -3 yards on the ground the entire game for Alabama. I mean, imagine that happening under Nick Saban, right? That would not have happened, And so you're not going to win a conference championship, let alone an SEC game against Georgia or any of the the upper tier SEC teams if you're running for -3 yards in the entire game.
Yeah.
We've known for the whole year, and they've had their success with it, but we've known that Bama's been a solely passing team, especially with Jam Miller being out from the majority of the season. But I mean, to have -3 yards, that's like, plug in NCAA 25-26 and you stop your buddy that's never played before, in real life, -3 yards an entire game as Alabama. That was the kind of the story of that game, and props to Georgia's run defense. Another reason why at this point in the season, I would not want to play them.
Yeah, you don't want to play them. Definitely don't want to see them on your slate. However, nobody has to play them in the first round, so everybody's looking forward to that. Maybe get a little extra time to prep for them. Other than that, that's about all I got on Georgia. I think they are like we touched on. I mean, I think, at least for me personally, I think it's Indiana, Ohio State, and Georgia. Probably then there's a slight little gap there to Texas Tech. I know that's going to probably offend some people. It's just I still have question marks in regards to Texas Tech, in regards to the best teams that they've played on their schedule. Now, have they handled majority of them? Yeah, they have. They're 12-1. So we'll just go ahead and roll into Texas Tech here. They're 12-1.
Might as well.
Yeah, they had another dominant win over BYU. So BYU fans, come at me all you want. I told you.
Yeah, and I mean that game though, it just went to show that Texas Tech was severely the better team this year, talent-wise.
We said they were the more talented
and
team.
It's nothing against BYU. It's that Texas Tech, with how they recruited in the offseason, in the portal and everything like that, and they have a boatload of NIL money. They were able to get the guys, and that's fine. If that's how they want to do it, it has worked, obviously. And that's why they have a team this year. Texas Tech does, and could just be this year, could be how they recruit on, and it's this same or similar success rate. But I mean, this year they were able to establish themselves with that talent. As it's nothing against BYU, it's just the fact that Texas Tech is that good. Like, they're not the normal Big 12 team that wins the Big 12 championship. Like, these guys can play with those many SEC teams and many Big 10 teams. Like, that's just how the roster was designed by Joey McGuire this offseason. So nothing against BYU. They just ran into the buzzsaw that is Texas Tech currently. Now, my only concern with Texas Tech going into the playoffs, well, here, I'll say this. So what I'm confident in Texas Tech and what separates them from like normal Big 12 or what we're used to in the Big 12, what separates them is the defense, right? That defense is going to keep them in every game that they play. No matter how many games they do play in the playoff, I think they're going to keep them in every single one. They're just that good. Mm-hmm. But my concern is can their offense score on the tougher defenses that they will inevitably play in the playoff, right? Because say Oregon wins, we'll just say Oregon beats JMU, right? And they play Oregon. Like, Oregon's defense is no slouch. And I don't think they've played a defense quite as good as Oregon's, at least not one that's comparable. And that's where I get concerned is can their offense turn around and score the points? Because, like I said, their defense, I believe, will keep them in an Oregon game easily. But you got to score points to win a game eventually. And that's what I'm concerned about in the playoff. And say they get by Oregon, then they got to turn around and go play Indiana. Most likely, that's an assumption. If the chalk holds,
the disrespect, insane. It's okay.
Well, that's okay. Okay, well, say they play Oklahoma, right? It's like it's the same thing, but perhaps worse for that offense. So that's where the concern for me lies. I'm not saying they can't make a deep run. That's another team that I really do think that is slept on and can make a deep run. It's just, can that offense take that next step? And if I see them, turn around and beat an Oregon team or beat an Indiana or beat an OU, then I'm like, okay, yeah, this team can win a national championship. And I still think they can. But
well, for me personally, I think if you're looking at it from a Texas Tech fan's perspective, I think you like the side of the bracket that you landed on. At least if that makes sense, right? Like, Indiana is the top seeded team in there. You got Oregon.
Do you?
I mean, you got Ohio State and Georgia on the other side.
Right. But Indiana just beat that Ohio State team, right? So It's like,
there's a question mark there, right? It's like, where do you think you could where do you like your matchups? And that's not something I don't think I can answer. I think that's going to be something that Joey McGuire can't even answer right now. If we asked him, if he came on the show, he probably couldn't tell you. But it's going to be something you'll find out after the game, and depending on how that plays out. But overall, yeah, really, I mean, fantastic year for Joey McGuire and Texas Tech. Just flat out, right? Like, we're not going, regardless of what happens here in the postseason, what happens in these playoff games, whether or not they see JMU or they see Oregon in their their quarterfinal matchup, I guess is what it would be. Yeah, quarterfinal matchup. No matter, regardless of which one they see, I think overall you look at this as a very successful year for Texas Tech, and also a very successful year for the strategy that they implemented, right? We saw what they did in the offseason, and then you see this success and these kind of the fruits of that labor or the money coming into effect there for Texas Tech.
Oh yeah, no, it's already a win of a year for Texas Tech, and regardless of what happens, yeah, it's a win. But I'm high on this team. I'm not saying they're going to go win the national championship per se, but I'm still high on this team. I think, like I said, I'm confident that their defense can keep them in any game that they play in the playoff. It's just, can you score the points?
Mm-hmm. So let's jump to the other side of the bracket, or actually stay on the same side. Sorry. We'll talk about a team that we've already touched on a few times in here. Number 5, Oregon, coming in at 11-1 or 11-1. Yeah, they're 11-1.
11-1.
Yeah, 11-1 with the one loss to Indiana at home. Oregon's looked there's been some question marks as far as Dante Moore and kind of how he's progressed. There were some struggles in that Indiana game, but outside of that one, you watched him in the big USC game. He played lights out, and he's kind of progressed as he's gotten more and more experience under his feet. And they look very solid. And obviously, a Dan Lanning coach team, they look really good on the defensive side of the ball. So Oregon does look like a very complimentary football team, and they're really developing into that role to be able to compete just about anybody. And I don't think any team is going to like their draw as far as like first round teams as much as Oregon likes their draw of having James Madison come to Oregon, come to Eugene and play them at home.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously as a 5 seed, that's what you want, is to play that G5 team, right? Compared to, last year Clemson was the 12 seed. And Texas was able to take care of them. But yeah, this draw for Oregon's pretty good in that first round. But this is another team like Georgia that I feel like is peaking at the right time. I really do think that, obviously they haven't lost a game. Clearly they're 11-1 since Indiana. But just seeing them from, that, because that was earlier on in the season, and now to this point in the season, it's like it really seems like they've kind of, and you use the perfect example of the USC game. It's kind of like they gave up what, 30 plus points getting to USC. But that was one of the best offenses in the country, and they were still able to outscore them on offense. So that they're probably one of the most balanced teams in this playoff, right? And they're kind of peaking at the right time. And another thing, like we all know, Dan Lanning's an absolute psychopath, and he still remembers that Rose Bowl ass whooping against Ohio State last year. Like, he's going to have these guys ready to go. It's JMU. They're favored by, I believe, 3 touchdowns. And they're going to want to make a late run. And they got Texas Tech after that, assuming they beat JMU. And then they'll likely have to play an Indiana or an OU or an Alabama, right? So Dan Lanning's going to have these guys ready to go. And this is one of those teams that, like I said, I do feel like is peaking right around this playoff time like Georgia is. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Like I said, they got a good spot, I think.
Yeah, I think it's one of those deals. The offense kind of started slow for this Oregon team, but it's really, as you've seen Dante Moore progress. There's never been a time where the moment looks too big for him. He looks too outgrown or whatever. He's lived up to the billing and the expectation that he had whenever he came to Oregon, and yeah, they're playing really complimentary ball. So really like that Oregon team at the number 5 slot. So let's go ahead and get into the number 6 team.
Yeah, this is my second most intriguing team in the playoff behind Texas Tech. Mainly because of the elephant in the room, right?
Right. Ole Miss. We're talking about Ole Miss, number 6.
Did I not say that? Sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
Second most intriguing team, Ole Miss behind Texas Tech. Yeah, obviously elephant in the room, Lane Kiffin leaving, right? But Pete Golden taking over, kind of like the players' pick for players' pick, and the probably the Ole Miss fan base, AD, everything kind of really wanted Pete Golden to take this team over. They seem like they're going to hit the ground running. Obviously, they haven't played a game, but Ole Miss fans are very high on this Pete Golden guy. I heard an interview or two of him. He seems like a really good dude. Seems like he can coach this team. He actually reminds me a lot of Dan Lanning, weirdly. But yeah, they are confident they're going to hit the ground running with this one. Obviously, they're in a good spot too, kind of similar to Oregon, where it's Pete Golding's first game head coaching, but they're playing Tulane, right? So they got the other G5 team. They beat Tulane earlier on in the season. I believe it was 45-7 was the final score. Ole Miss took that one. So they're going to try to do that again, and it'll be a tune-up game is in probably Pete Golding's eyes. So they're in a good spot. We'll see how they play Tulane. But yeah, they got the 6. It seems like the committee didn't value the Kiffin departure, which is a good thing. I mean, for the players. So be exciting to see what Ole Miss can do.
Yeah, and they there was some really concerns early on. I still think there's some concerns for me, at least as I'm looking at. I think Lane Kiffin not being there is going to impact this team in some way.
That's an absolute obvious thing to say, because Lane Kiffin was the play caller, right? And you don't have your offensive play caller theanymore.
Right.
So that's
the
going to
offensive
change.
Coordinator
right there.
came back, Charlie Wise. I think he's still joining Lane Kiffin and his staff. I don't really know what's going on with that whole situation.
He's coaching the playoffs, but that's the thing. Lane Kiffin was the play caller, though. So That's where it gets interesting.
Yeah, so and they're slotted for 2 rematches, right? So 2 games Ole Miss has already played this year. As long if they beat Tulane, then they got a rematch with Georgia waiting for them. But hosting Tulane is probably not a bad spot to be in if you're Ole Miss,
I believe they're
especially.
a 17 or 18 point uh, favorite. So yeah,
Yeah, so really, really good spot there if you're Ole Miss to try to get yourself a rebound game in a Tulane team where the head coach, where's John Summerall's focus going to be? Obviously, he's already been hired as the Florida head coach.
hey,
We'll touch on that here a little later, but yeah.
and well, yeah, we'll wait on Tulane when we get there. But yeah, I mean, seems like he's got his guys still focused in. But
Yeah, so Ole Miss, the question mark, I mean, I thought it was a little surprising. Like the weak point of Ole Miss this year has been their defense. And then they promote their defense coordinator to their head coach. So we'll see what that part kind of looks like if they're able to keep the things going on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, losing Lane Kiffin's going to be a big hit. So I'm interested to see what this team's going to look like against Tulane. But I expect them, at least for the players, I expect them to have a lot of fire. Obviously, coming out of a situation where you feel like you were probably disrespected a little bit by your head coach. Whether that's fair or not fair, as a player, I feel like that's going to be kind of where your mindset is in the locker room. So we'll move on to College Station, man. Number 7, Texas A&M. After the upsetting loss to Texas that knocked them out of the SEC championship game, A&M slots in at the number 7 spot. The final of the one-loss teams outside of JMU. So the final of the one-loss Power 4 teams here. A&M, we had said it, we had said it all year. They were a very complimentary football team. The way they were able to win games in multiple different facets. They were able to win relying on their defense. They were able to win relying on their offense. There were some question marks that we did have regarding their schedule. How good is this A&M team really based on who they've played within the SEC? If you look at it, they outside of Texas, they played the bottom half of the SEC. Then obviously they've played Texas and ended up losing that game in Austin. A couple key turnovers there that were uncharacteristic, but I think they still played pretty well against Texas. I think Texas just was playing for their entire hope of their season there. So obviously, if you're A&M, you're like, hey, without those 2 turnovers, that's a completely different game. I like that mindset. However, we'll see how that's going to translate. As you got a tough team in Miami coming into town that probably has the same best win that you do as a A&M team, right? They both beat
yeah,
Notre
that Notre
Dame.
Dame game. Yep.
Yeah, they both beat Notre Dame. So share that kind of same best win, and we'll see what it looks like whenever they face head to head here against Miami.
Yeah. Uh, probably the most ticked off team coming into the playoff. Coming off a loss, right? Heartbreaking loss to your probably with the
Biggest
rivalry
rival.
being reinstated, probably biggest rival, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to be ticked off, and not only are the players ticked off, the fans are also ticked off. They need to bounce back, and you got a playoff game in Kyle Field. I would not want to be Miami going in there, but that is still a very talented Miami team. They're another very balanced team. We'll talk about them a little bit later, but I am excited to see a witness from the TV screen. Obviously, it won't be there, but home playoff game in Kyle Stadium. I think that's gonna be very, very hostile environment for Miami. Yeah, with A&M going into the playoffs, man, it's can Marcel Reed minimize any mistakes from here on out, right? Like not do anything that he did against Texas late at all, because you're only going to play better teams from here on out, especially if you make a late run. So with that being said, because it's not all on Marcel Reed, of course, right? Can the O-line keep him, not throwing off platform? I think that's a big thing. He's shown that he struggles a little bit throwing off platform and not setting his feet. Because man, when he's hot, that whole team's hot, and they're virtually an impossible team to stop between Marcel Reed and his feet, the overall run game of that offense, and then the defensive line. Man, if they get going, right, they get into a rhythm like that. That A&M team, we saw it all year, with an exception to the Texas game, and this Miami game. I think this will be a good tell. This game against Miami, it'll be a good tell of obviously if they lose, they're out. But if they do win and in a relatively convincing fashion, and I mean by like 6.5, to 10 points, right? Then we'll know that this A&M team can stick around. But yeah, that 7-10 matchup, that one will be a good one.
That's a really good matchup. Kind of intriguing matchup, at least for me. We'll be sure we're gonna preview all these games and these matchups next week on our kind of like first round college football playoff preview episode. So we'll be sure to touch on all these matchups a little bit more. So this is kind of more just breaking down the teams. And then I guess we move to number 8.
Yeah, and I only got a couple things on these guys.
Yeah.
Number eight, Oklahoma. So almost the exact same seeding as Tennessee last year, just almost swapped. So Oklahoma takes the number 8 seed in the playoff. Man, it's kind of goes back to Texas Tech, but even more so with Oklahoma, right? Defense can keep in every game. My only question mark, and like I said, I'll let you kind of harp on whatever you want to harp on with this. I think you probably agree with me, though. The key to the playoffs for OU, man, is like, can Mateer get back to his old pre-surgery ways, right? We saw it against LSU with the yards and stuff, just minus the turnovers, of course, right? But I think John Mateer is going to end up being, without the obvious key, the defense. I think John Mateer will be kind of like the main key outside the defense in the playoffs. Is like, can he control the game on offense? Because that defense is going to hold everybody to probably like max 17 points per game, right? So it's like, can you score more than 17 every game? And that's my biggest question mark for OU. Got a tough one, rematch against Alabama in the first round. I'll hold off on what I was going to say about Bama because they're the next ones we'll talk about. But yeah, that's my take on OU. Defense is going to keep you in every game. John Mateer is going to be the difference. And then the run game overall, I think outside of John Mateer's legs, can he be not the leading rusher every game? But yeah, other than that, man, I'm excited to see OU play Bama again. I'm excited to see if they can make a run. That'd be a lot of fun, and see that defense do it.
Yeah, and I think part of it is, OU, they obviously I think they're going to have a decent defense advantage against just about every team they face up against, unless you're looking at against probably Ohio State and Georgia. You're looking at probably comparable units there. I think if you're OU, you got a lot of confidence in their kicker, Tate Sandell.
I really only think the only comparable defenses to OU, man, is Ohio State, apparently Indiana, and then maybe Texas Tech. I wouldn't even put Georgia up there, and they're doing well right now, right? Yeah. But just the consistency across board, I'd say those 4 teams, those defenses will keep you in most games.
Yeah, and I think a big part of what OU is going to have, right? Obviously, you've seen the 4-game streak that they went on to close out the season, beating Tennessee, beating Alabama, beating Missouri, and then beating LSU. And you got to think they did all that majority without possibly their best player on defense. Obviously, the last time we saw Harvin Mason Thomas, defensive end, was against Tennessee whenever he had the little fumble return for a touchdown. Ended up pulling a hammy there. That was the last time he's been seen. He's expected to probably be back for the playoffs. So he'll probably be back for this first round game. And an interesting point to me, I know you touched on it, John Mateer getting healthy. Obviously, that's a huge part of this deal for OU. I think these 3 weeks off are kind of doing a lot of benefit towards that. One of the things that, it came after the surgery and you're like, okay, I think he's probably not 100%, And I think until I heard Brent Venables give that interview with Skip Bayless where he touched on about, he's like, yeah, John Mateer might be one of those things where he doesn't really get healthy to the offseason. Looking at getting more time off, getting closer back to 100%. To the John Mateer that we saw earlier in the season. I mean, obviously we saw the 300 yards he threw against LSU. I will say probably about 100 of those yards you could probably discount. One of them is on a bubble screen to Deion Burks that went for 41 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, but you got the athletes, right? So it's like,
the athletes.
If he can get the ball to the athletes.
Yeah. And then you got Isaiah Satanga who went for a 58-yard touchdown and was just uncovered by LSU. I mean, he's open by 15 yards. There's nobody around him.
One of the best defenses in the country too, under Blake Baker at LSU, and That's why you
Yeah.
play the game. That's why you
That's why
play the
you play.
game.
That's why you play the game. I think OU big deal is going to be getting their running backs healthy, getting fresh legs under Xavier Robinson, Torrey Braylock. Both those guys have been struggling with injuries. Xavier Robinson was playing against LSU with double knee braces on. So if that tells you anything about where he's at, as far as the running backs go, he still saw the bulk of the carries. So shout out to that dude playing injured, playing tough. I think these 3 weeks are going to be big for OU to try to get a little bit healthier. And you got a Alabama team that we're going to touch on here in a second that is coming in probably town and a little bit injured, a little bit beaten up. So, yeah, overall, I'm excited to see what OU can do. I think their their defense is obviously one of the best units in the country. I think they probably have the weapon of the best kicker in the country with Tate Sandell. It's just going to be all dependent on what John Mateer and that offense and Ben Arbuckle can do. So that's going to be really what's going to end up writing the story for this OU team. Is I think their defense is going to be able to play them into the majority of games and give them an opportunity. It's just going to be whether or not they make the plays there.
Yeah, and that's that perfect segue into the number 9
Alabama.
team Alabama's the number 9 seed. So obviously Oklahoma takes on Alabama in Norman, Oklahoma, being the 8th seed. My thing about Alabama, it's going to be another one of those pissed off teams, right? They just got their asses handed to them against Georgia in the SEC championship. They looked really vulnerable, especially in the run game. And that's another thing that's I kind of waited to talk about when we got to them. My concern is Bama's run game, because you just came off a game where you ran for -3 yards an entire game, and then you got to turn around and go to Norman, Oklahoma, and play probably the best defense in the entire country, and definitely probably one of the best run defenses in the country, but overall defense. So if you can't throw the ball with Ty Simpson, which what they've been relied on and successfully relied on for most of the season, man, I'll just drop 8 and rush 4 every single freaking play, and I'm going to rely on those guys to covers. And that's my concern for Bama, is how one-dimensional that they are, and they're going to a playoff Norman. That's no matter where you go in the SEC, if you host a playoff game, I would not want to be the visiting team. And Bama coming off a very vulnerable game. Yes, it was the SEC championship. Yes, I do believe that you shouldn't drop out if you play in the SEC championship, but you looked vulnerable, and you're playing probably a better defense that first round. So that's my concern for Bama, man. If they can figure out, I think Jam Miller's supposed to come back for the playoffs, so we'll see if that has any effect on Alabama's run game or not. But man, I'm worried about Bama in that first round. If they can somehow get past OU, which is another thing, I think OU it's probably gonna have to score more than 23 points compared to last time. But yeah, I'm concerned about Bama with how they played against Georgia.
Yeah, then you also have, their injuries are starting to pile up on Bama, especially here at the end of the year. We'll see who they get back. Obviously, they get 1 week off, so they don't get. That's another thing, is like they're coming off an OU team that's getting 2 weeks off and then a game of prep, and Bama only gets this 1 week off, and then they're in prep week. So you're at a disadvantage there from at least what the most recent time you played, how much prep time you have for your next matchup. And then, yeah, with the rushing attack, it's been a problem for Alabama all year. It rarely flared its hair in this SEC championship game. As far as how Georgia was able to limit Ty Simpson and throwing the ball. I think but whenever you're only running the ball for -3 yards, right? I think your problem is probably more rooted than a running back coming back, right? I don't think a running back maybe come back fixes that. I think there's probably deeper issues along the offensive line there, and we'll see if Alabama's going to be able to get them addressed, right? That's kind of a
So
that's
just
kind
real
of
quick, just real
tough
quick.
fix. Go ahead.
So Alabama's rushing yards per game and yards per carry are 119th and 123rd respectively in the country right now going into the playoffs. So that's my point with Alabama, what I'm concerned about. Like I trust Ty Simmons to throw the ball, but man, after that SEC championship.
Right, and everybody's going to point to. They're like, well, hey, Alabama, they threw for 200 more yards than OU. And the last time these two teams faced up, Ty Simpson had to throw the ball 42 times in that one. But Alabama, you forced the turnovers. But that was when you were at home, right? You had a full packed house. Now you're going to be on the road. So now you're going to have the crowd noise. You're going to have the defense playing with that crowd. And well, like I said, we'll touch on it next week. It's just Alabama. There are some real question marks, like there are with OU, right? OU's offense, there's question marks. Bama's run game. I think at this point we can just flat out say we've had a full sample size season. They're just not very good. I don't know how much they can improve, but we'll see. Right? If they haven't fixed it, if Kalen DeBoer hasn't fixed it yet, there's probably a chance he's not going to be able to fix it. I think they would have tried to fix it already if it was something that was that fixable. So yeah, it's question marks for Alabama. We can go ahead and move on. Number 10, Miami. We've already kind of touched on them. 10-2. The ACC got a team in.
Not Notre Dame,
but it wasn't a team that played in their conference championship game.
Yeah, the chaos scenario that I was hoping would happen did happen. Duke beat Virginia 27-20, and it was like the ultimate CFB chaos game that if it played out, it was going to be like who's who, right? And yeah, Duke showed his owns that game. Too bad for Virginia, but Miami's in.
They got compared head to head with Notre Dame. I don't know how that really changes from the week prior, but the committee made a point about they're like, oh well, the resumes were complete.
It should have been that way.
Yeah,
a few weeks back, and yeah, they had to address the head to head
matters.
It should have already been addressed a couple of weeks ago. But
yeah, I saw from that perspective, I can see why Notre Dame's pissed. They're like, hey, if you were going to rank Miami ahead of us because of the head-to-head, it should have already happened, and I agree with that.
They did it on the week. They did it on the week where neither team played a football game.
Right. It should have already happened. But ultimately, I still think the committee went with the right decision, right? The on-field results have to matter between these teams. We can't spin ourselves into these hypotheticals and these analytics where we take the person out of the results off the field. Like we're saying, oh, that doesn't matter because we have certain analytics. Hey, man, this isn't Moneyball, right? We play football. It is played on a 100-yard field with an oddly shaped freaking ball.
And there was a game with that oddly shaped ball against both of these teams, and one won and one lost.
Right. It's like you mentioned it last week. You're like, hey, I could point to freaking 4 hours of game tape that tells me which of these two teams is better.
Look at this here. Look at this screen here that I have of game tape of these two teams playing against each other.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, I digress. But
Miami's in though. Carson Beck. Let's touch on him a little bit. Defense has been really good. Obviously, they had 2 letdown games in the kind of the middle of the season that really threw some question marks for this Miami team. Carson Beck's, I think, he's been good. I'm not going to say he's been absolutely elite.
But
he's been good, right?
Since that Louisville game, he has been playing a lot better, and that's the thing with how I feel about this Miami team being in. Like, obviously, outside of the head-to-head with Notre Dame, who gets in. Like, Miami is another one of those teams that actually can make a deep run in the playoffs. Like, they have the talent, just like similar to those top 4 teams, similar to a lot of these teams that are in. They can make a late run. They have the talent. Carson Beck, when he's on, is on. And that defense is going to keep you in a lot of these games too. So, yeah, this Miami team is very talented. They're very good. They're very well coached. Some Miami fans might say, late Mario Cristobal calls are questionable, but they're 10-2, right? And they're in the playoffs. So,
yeah, 10-2. Malachi Toney, absolutely dynamic for him at wide receiver. They do some stuff with him in the backfield. He's explosive, dude. Just anytime you watch him with the ball, the ball in his hands.
And if he can have like a playoff run like Jeremiah Smith did last year as a freshman, hey, world is yours.
The world is yours, right? And I think part of it is you feel really comfortable with Carson Beck at quarterback, right? This is a guy that has been there. He's done it before. He's been in all these kind of big games, so you're not going to get too much of a flinch out of him, right? Like it's not, hey, we've never seen what he looks like, in these situations, as you would with some of the younger quarterbacks like Julian Sayin or Dante Moore or, you could have the list, Trinidad Chambliss, Marcel Reed, John Mateer, Ty Simpson, all these guys, right? You haven't seen them in these playoff games, whereas expect, would have that experience there. So I think that's kind of a nice to have if you're a Miami fan, and they are a very complete team, and I'm really excited. We'll touch on it and we'll predict it next week. But yeah, I'm really excited for that A&M matchup.
Yeah, they got a tough matchup on the road against A&M. Like I said earlier, that Kyle Field, man, playoff game in Kyle Field. I wouldn't want to play there as the away team. But yeah, so we got our 11 and 12 seeds, our G5 teams that made it in.
G5s.
We got number 11 Tulane and number 12 JMU. They're talented teams, man. John Summerall's still coaching at Tulane through the rest of the playoffs, and obviously he's
House divided. He's got a split hat.
Yeah, well, you saw his tweet about having two phones.
Yeah, 2 phones. Yeah,
he's got his Florida phone, his Tulane phone. Hey, but he's got these Tulane guys locked in. I mean, they beat that. We were incorrect about that North Texas Tulane game. They're conference champions. He still seems like he's got them playing for him. So, obviously tough matchup in playing Ole Miss. They played them previously this year, lost in a big way. But I mean, hey, if John Summerall and if these guys are riding for him, they got a chance.
Yeah, and they end up beating North Texas, turned them over 5 times. So it's really tough. It's honestly kind of admirable that North Texas did come back and make it pretty, at least a competitive game there towards the end. But yeah, Tulane, shout out to them, turned them over 5 times. One of the most explosive offenses in the country, and the offense did enough, especially what they were able to do on the ground game. However, you are going up against the Ole Miss team as your first round, and I think there is going to be
it's a one-loss SEC team. I would be a little concerned about that.
I think there's a gap there, right? I don't think we're going to be.
It's a little bit of
a gap there. So
yeah,
we'll see what Tulane's going to be able to do, but overall, I think you are. John Summerall, he said he was going to. I think whenever he took, he said, "Yeah, we're going to compete for national championships." I guess technically, if you're in the playoff, you are competing for a national championship. You have a seat at the dance floor. There's a lot of teams that finished in that probably 11 through 16 or 17 that would absolutely love to trade places for Tulane and have the opportunity to compete for a national championship. So
Notre
Dame, Texas, Vandy, BYU, that pretty much that group of teams right there would all love this opportunity that Tulane has in front of them.
Right. Hey, but they got it, so make the most of it, right?
Yeah, you already played them once, so you know what they're going to try to do to you. So let's see if Tulane
they're without their offensive play caller. They got their coordinator, but they're without their play caller. So
yeah, so we'll see what they're able to do. We'll touch on JMU. We kind of already hit on them a little bit earlier. Got the bid against Oregon. They ended up getting in as a byproduct of Duke winning the ACC championship and beating Virginia. So
yeah, this JMU team, they're interesting because so obviously they're 13-1 or 12-1, excuse me, conference champions, right? That's how they made it in. And then obviously with Duke beating Virginia in the ACC championship helped them in a little bit, but they've blown everybody out that they've beaten to an extent. Most teams that they played.
Yeah.
You had mentioned before we went on air they lost to Louisville. That was the best team that they've played, right?
That's the most comparable team they've played, right? And as far as what they got.
And my concern with them going up against an Oregon team is that the best team that they've beaten is Old Dominion. And I mentioned again right before we went on, they're the 52nd power rated team, Old Dominion is, and that's their best win. So it's just it's the same thing you said briefly about Tulane. It's like the competition comparison. It's just is the main concern, which is that's an easy take to make, right? That's everybody's concern with these games. Of course, we would love to see one of these G5 or both G5 teams, upset. It's just football's a little bit different than many of the other sports when it comes to the talent and the comparison in like these conferences. So it's cool to see these guys in, but yeah, when you talk about like teams like Notre Dame and Vanderbilt and BYU, especially being a Big 12 runner-up, getting left out because you got to have the G5s in. Like, look, I like G5 teams, but is this the 12 best teams in the country? Playing for a national championship? No, it's not. So I hope they don't get mollywopped against their respective opponents, but I don't see that not being the case. So
Yeah, and their head coach Ryan
Loved. I was
Silverfield is also already got another job that he's.
Well, Silverfield was Memphis.
Oh, sorry, yeah, not Silverfield.
Yeah.
But their head coach is gone. Let me think of his name.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about, but yeah, Billy Napier's taking over for him.
Oh, Silverfield or JMU?
JMU.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right. I did see that.
Sunbelt Billy's coming back.
Sunbelt Billy. I'm trying to figure out. Let's see. His name's Bob Chesney. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a highly sought after name in the head coaching realm, and he is coaching through the playoffs. And
yeah, UCLA hired him. I was about to say yeah. So he is splitting duty there. If I'm a bet man, he's probably not gonna have to do it long. So he'll get his chance to
You're not
get
be
another,
alone there.
Yeah, to get a crack at Oregon again, maybe next season as the head coach at UCLA. Army Navy, let's dive into it. That wraps up our college football playoff kind of synopsis of all those teams, kind of where we're feeling about those teams. Y'all probably got a little bit of insight to where we're feeling about some of those matchups and how they stack up. But we're going to go ahead and dive into an Army Navy preview. And this is America's game, right? It's got that's why it gets its own week. That's why it happens. It's the only game that's going to be played this weekend. How long that lasts, I don't know. We'll have plenty of off-season discussion about fixing how we fix college football and that sort of thing. So we'll give y'all some of our insights, some of our ideas. Not that anybody's going to listen, but we got 9-2 Navy coming into this one, led by Blake Horvath. Just a absolute. Just an absolute dual threat quarterback. I think he's brought a dynamic to Navy that we haven't seen in a while as far as what he's able to do down the field as a passer. And then we got an Army team, 6-5, coming into this one. Navy is favored by 6 points currently, and they're predicted to win on ESPN's playoff predictor. And ultimately, this is a huge rivalry game. It's tough to predict which way it's going to go. Both quarterbacks are the leading rushers for their teams. Just kind of how the triple option works, right? It's all going to funnel around those quarterbacks. However, whenever I look at how these two teams match up, very similar on the offensive, defensive side of the ball. It's just what Horvath is as a passer and what he's able to do as a passer. I don't think Army kind of has that same comparable, right? That's the one, when I'm looking at these teams, that's the one difference that stands out is what Navy's able to do with Horvath as a passer. He's thrown for 1,390 yards for 9 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and added another 1,000 with his legs. I think he's going to be real motivated for this one, as both these teams always are. But yeah, that one, I'm going to go ahead and get my pick out of the way. I'm going with Navy. I just think what he adds in that dimension, I think they're both pretty similar on both the defensive side of the ball as far as what they're able to do. Obviously, they're very familiar with the offense. They both know how to defend it. Just what Horvath's able to do as a passer, I just don't think Army has that in them to match, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Not really a hot take there at all, but yeah, going with Navy.
Yeah. No, I purposely did not do any notes in this game. I have no notes with nothing that says Army versus Navy. It's completely blank. Going with Army. Did it on purpose. Going with my gut. I went with my gut because it seems like every time I pick this game when I try to write notes and look at everything.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
So I'm going with Army.
I think
Go Army, beat Navy.
Did Army win last year?
Believe so.
Yeah, I think Army did win.
I think I picked Navy last year too.
I know I picked Navy last year. I make a habit out of picking Navy in this game, and
yeah, 31-13 Navy.
No, Navy. Year. Yeah, Navy won.
So maybe I picked. Oh, you know what? I think I picked Army because Army was ranked going into that game.
Yeah, that's right. Army was 11-1 going into that one.
Which is crazy.
Navy ended up winning. I think we ended up picking Army last year.
Yeah. Well, I'm going with Army.
Going with Army this one to get the upset. I'm going with Navy. I think Horvath is he's the difference maker in this one. So yeah, all I got on that one.
Yeah, don't ask me why I picked, but I'm picking Army because I'm always wrong on this game. So, and I'll probably still be, but going with Army.
Yeah. So, split in that one. We'll probably just give a quick little note on it, how it ended up turning out. But enjoy that one, man. It's always cool to watch have the troops play in that one, and cool matchup. I hope we get to keep having it, keep dedicating it as its own game, because it's really a kind of penultimate game of America. Hell yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right. I think you'd probably have another branch in there if you had a say in it, but
Well, like I said, we got to support the midshipmen there. They're Department of the Navy, so we got to
yeah.
support the midshipmen there. Um, and hopefully Navy gets the win. Other than that, man, that's all I got on this one. You got anything else you want to touch on?
No, man, it's sad that it's coming to a close, but a lot of exciting weeks coming up here, and for probably most sickos that the few that watch our show and listen to the show, it's I'm excited for bowl season. I like bowls. I'm sure they do too. So I'm excited for
Unless
bowl
they're
season.
Notre Dame fans and they don't like bowls.
Well, yeah, and then with all that, with a couple teams, pulling out, it's too bad. But yeah, I'm excited for what bowls that will be played. I know Tennessee's playing in a bowl. They have at least haven't yet opted out, which
Who do
that'd
they
be.
got? Who are they playing in a bowl?
They are playing Illinois in the Music City Bowl. So Baylama and boys.
That'll be an interesting matchup. So yeah, obviously the off season for college football, it's kind of already started. Breaking news got happened right before we started this pod is Sherrone Moore got fired from Michigan. So we'll be sure to touch on, we'll update a bunch of the off-season stuff kind of in the off-season. College football's calendar is broken, but we're going to try to keep it right for y'all. We need to be focused on what's happening in the playoff, finishing out the 25 season, and then we'll start moving on to off-season talk in the 26 season. Ultimately, man, we thank y'all for tuning in. We thank y'all for listening. As always, subscribe to the show. Set up notifications, get alerted whenever the new episode comes out, and tell your friends about it. We've seen some real good growth from the show this year, at least from year 1 to year 2. So we're hoping that continues to happen, and we appreciate y'all for always supporting us and tuning in and listen to us two idiots sit here and talk about college football like we like to.
Oh yeah.
All right. Until then, we'll catch y'all next week. Peace.